awareness part is very important. If I connect it with theme of this year's Women's Day, which is giving wholeheartedly. Essentially, we want impact at scale that touches people's heart, inspires people, but also has a business plan attached to it that shows that yes, climate, biodiversity, social inclusion are important topics, and it has a tangible and an intangible value.
What about women in countries who have not been like as lucky as us, and who are then living in countries maybe where the men are not so educated either on how they should treat women? We often sit at meetings and everything and say, oh, we're empowering women, which I sort of really dislike that word, because they're generally talking to an audience of women who are already empowered. So how do we make these changes?
I used to think that to be successful I had to behave like a man. But actually, men and women are different, and I think, really sort of not trying to be like the guys and just leading through our own female patterns and, being fine with that.
A pay gap as well. I think that about a year ago, women in Ireland, they were stopped getting paid from October to December. They were working for free, but that was the number of months that was actually the difference in the pay gap.
There are specific nuances that women bring to a table or to a company or to the industry that needs to be appreciated what it is, then, rather than being judged, and she shouldn't be feeling, oh, am I doing enough?
I look now at in the last, maybe 250 years or so, where, women had no votes. We were absolutely subjected to men. We didn't work. We did, we sat around being bored and pretty. Or in the case of Jane Austen, she became an author and wonderful writer. But, hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, we were revered. We were women. We were rulers. We were leaders. Does anybody know where we lost that? So very welcome to At the Table with Adrian, focus on pink teapot, and we're mostly wearing blue. And this is season 2 of AERZENtalks. I'm Adrian Doolan. I am the Managing Director for the Clean Energy Business Council, and we have a partnership with AERZEN, and part of our leadership on their thought leadership partnership is that we do podcasts, and very much with a focus on women. And we have also within the Clean Energy Business Council a working group on women in clean energy. But I just want to focus this whole series of podcasts for season 2 on women, on what we're doing, what we're capable of, what we're more than capable of, and how we lead very responsibly as well. And we operate in a different manner, and why that's really important for our societal development. We're doing this podcast today under the International Women's Day from 8th of March, their theme, which is Give to Gain. So this is it's about giving not as in a charity, but giving to each other, and giving to mentor, giving to empower women to in leadership roles, and to get them into leadership roles. So I am really absolutely delighted to be here at the table with you guys. Avanthika, I'd like to start with you first. And thank you for joining us. And I'm proud to say also that you're a board member for the Clean Energy Business Council. Would you like to introduce yourself to us, please?
Thank you, Adrian. My pleasure to be here today. I'm Avanthika. I'm Director for Consulting, Emerging Technologies for Customized Energy Solutions. So this is energy services and consulting company. We support companies, corporates to enter into new technology development. We support utilities in modeling studies for integrating renewable energy resources onto the grid. Thank you that I'm also on the board of Clean Energy Business Council and also heading research for India Energy Storage Alliance. It is yet another association based out of India for promoting, again, renewable energy integration to the grid through new technology adoption, which is energy storage, electric mobility, and into hydrogen. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. And actually, before I pass on to Farah, I mean, one thing you mentioned there is going into these smaller areas and giving electricity and that to, and especially for women as well, from all safety aspects and everything. But I think we'll hit on that later. So thank you very much for joining us. Delighted to have you here. Farah. Please introduce
So
yourself.
I'm Farah Naz. I am Global Climate Director for Sarbana Jurong Group. It's an urban infrastructure company. And my work is across their global offices across 40 countries and looking at climate decarbonization. The key part of my work is Climate Nexus, where I work with climate, AI, and financial conversations. Yes.
And besides all of that very busy life, you are also an author of books for big people and for little people.
Yes.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about the Net Zero City? Because this is very interesting. And I am also very grateful that you signed it. So thank you so much.
So key part of my work is Climate Nexus, where I work with climate and finance and technology. And I felt it's relevant to share the knowledge and give back to society as well as children. So the first book, Net Zero City, is the region's first book on decarbonization in this region. And actually the year I launched the book is the very year that UAE launched its net zero strategy. The second book, Mission Zero, is also a book focused on climate for children. It talks about food, energy, and water nexus. And when I wrote that book, I was actually delivering COP28 for the UAE government. I did not plan both, but the idea of the book is to inspire the future generation who's going to write the blueprint of our future through a climate lens.
Yeah, very important. And I think, education and awareness is key to how we look at sustainability going forward and for our future. But we'll hit on that later. Charlotte, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
Introduce yourself to us, please.
I'm Charlotte Borghesi. I'm the founder of a company called Kids Inc. We are a completely vertically integrated company, from designing schools and education facilities right through to refurbishing them and manufacturing furniture. So we and do everything in between. So we have founded here in the UAE almost 10 years ago. We have 500 employees.
Women-led?
Yes, of course. I do have my husband at my side. But I won't talk about that. But we're still, actually, apart from our manufacturing facility, we're around 65% female in the company.
Yes.
And in the leadership team, we're 70% female. All by accident, actually.
Yeah.
Not with targets, and we can talk about
Well,
that
maybe
later.
to get more than 50-50, so that's amazing. But you're not just in the construction of classrooms of the future, and you're building around wellness and everything, because we're surrounded by authors this morning, because you have written this amazing book, Beyond the Box, and it's all about you explain it. Rather than me telling you.
Yeah, well, actually, when we started designing schools and learning spaces, often they're briefed briefed by teachers, owners, whoever, who have kind of very strong points of view over, okay, I like blue or green, or the space should be like this or that. It didn't feel right to us, actually. We felt within the company that actually there's a lot more science behind space and the impact of space on well-being, and actually on learning outcomes. So we decided to not start a new study, but actually look at a lot of the scientific data and evidence that existed. So we did a review of 40 years of scientific papers and looked at actually where is the data behind space and buildings and the built environment on outcomes for children. And through that book, we established something we call the enriched environments model, which is all of the 31 quality factors that actually have evidence behind them, which contribute to better design and outcomes. So that culminated in the book, which actually we wrote and published ourselves. We designed it, and we're sharing it free to the world, actually.
Yeah, it's
so
brilliant.
We don't sell it. We have an e-version and obviously a hard copy, and we're trying to get it into the hands of as many designers and decision makers as possible.
Because I think going forward, and even speaking about women's rights, and I don't want to keep harping on about how wonderful women are, but I think education is actually key, and educating the boys as well going forward. I think the younger generations are have fairly got it. I've both a millennial and a Gen Z. And I see within their friendship circles, the respect for each other. There doesn't seem to be much of a difference between the male and the female. But I think the whole education system, I believe, radically needs to change anyway. I know that, when you have boys in these classrooms and, 5 and 6-year-old lads, and they're trying to sit on their hands to prevent themselves from just running all over the place. I mean, are we very open to different types of education now? Is that coming? Specifically here in the UAE, I think it's very heartening to see that.
Yeah, definitely. There's been, in my 10 years in this industry, there's been a massive change in mindset. Starting very much in the earliest years, which are actually the most formative in terms of establishing some of these, beliefs and behaviours. In class we talk about boys need to run around, they need to write on walls. And typically a classroom was 24 tables and chairs, all at the same height, arranged in the same way. So we very much look at how we can put different typologies of furniture, enable children to lay on the floor and do their exam, actually, or their test, or whatever that is.
Yeah.
And in the most progressive schools, that's happening. Actually, the biggest problem we tend to have is actually parents. And schools worried that actually they may alienate parents because parents are looking for a certain type of education.
Yeah.
And so how to kind of deal with all of those things together.
Yeah. How would you feel about that, Avanthika, about your daughter? You have a daughter who's actually an author as well, right?
Yes, that's right. My daughter got her first book published. It's a fantasy fiction, thanks to some of the platforms that are there, which are giving opportunities for children. But to answer your question, so I have a son and a daughter, they're twins, and they grew up together, not knowing that they're of a particular gender until they actually started school. Which is when they kind of started identifying themselves with other boys or the girls and started showing different behavior altogether. So what we actually tried to inculcate in them as a family, that, you're no different to each other, now they're completely opposite to what we have actually taught them, because in the school it's actually a different atmosphere and environment that is probably creating it then. So I'm trying to see how to bridge that. I don't know, maybe change school, or I don't know what's the way ahead.
So it's probably because we're in such a multicultural society, I guess, here in the UAE, because you can, you're often, one message comes out in one country where it's kind of one language, whereas here we're like, over 200 nationalities. So it's probably, but that's kind of a shame, when things like that happen. But Farah, when you're talking about education, awareness, climate, women, where do you see for the future of?
So we are in the midst of a climate and biodiversity emergency. Most of the cities and countries have announced their climate goals. So the next 3 to 5 years is extremely important. And it's not with just the decision makers and investors and policymakers. It's also with all of us who are working and designing spaces for adults as well as children. Now, in terms of address your question, the awareness part is very important. And if I connect it with the theme of this year's Women's Day, which is giving wholeheartedly. So I think when we talk about climate conversation, the curation of the conversation is very important. How do we curate that conversation to the audience, and what are we trying to achieve? Awareness is a very important part, whether it's through your design or through your work. But all of us have to take that role of creating that sense of awareness. But also the clarity of vision and evidence-based design is very important. But at the end of the day, the business case is something we have to look at. So whether we are discussing climate, biodiversity, essentially we want impact at scale that touches people's heart, inspires people, but also has a business plan attached to it that shows that, yes, climate, biodiversity, social inclusion are important topics, and it has a tangible and an intangible value. So from my perspective, curating that conversation, giving back through mentoring, having one-to-one conversation, these kind of platforms really creates that ripple effect. What we want is more of these ripple effects.
And are women coming enough to the table? I mean, within your industry, Avanthika, I mean, and you also must be a great example to your children as well, to have women working in the field of the renewable technology as well. Are women underrepresented still in this industry as we go forward?
Yes, so in the energy sector, I'm seeing the change a lot. And even in UAE, you can definitely see the change. A lot of women-led ministries. Even in energy sector, we have a lot of women in the top positions in director levels in clean energy transition, future energy sector. So I think that's actually changing a lot in UAE. I can also speak from India. Yes, in India, I think our finance minister is a woman. Several women CEOs are in the emerging tech sector. So yeah, the traditional energy sector picture is actually changing. I'm yet to see so much in oil and gas, but the electricity, clean energy transition, newer technologies, a lot of entrepreneurs, women coming in. So there is a definite change for you.
Say like role models are so important actually, and it's something I didn't really realize until I got older. Throughout my career, it's something that's talked about, female role models. But when I look back, really sort of my leadership journey and my desire to make a difference running an organization from an early age came from, the headmistress that ran my school, being a powerful woman, who did something actually all the other schools of my friends, were run by male principals. Now, interesting because education is actually, more female biased in terms of the overall workforce, but actually at a leadership level, it's still very male biased. I think I've learned over the years as I approach 50, it's about, how can we're very powerful in terms of the impact and influence we can have on other women and young girls.
And you were saying earlier that within your organization, you're 75%
Yeah,
women.
and it's just by accident.
Consciously, no, definitely not.
No, definitely not. And I think, women, we just attract women actually. And I know we were talking before. There's definitely two types of women. Probably we'll come on to talk about that later. But if you get into the right female circles, women really help each other. And I was trying to reflect why we've got so many women. There's a group actually that I've been a member of for 4 years. It's founded by women, started by completely informal. It's called Construction Fit Out Super Women. It's a WhatsApp group. There's 450 women on it. There's nothing financial at stake. 99% of us don't know who each other are.
Yeah.
But some way that group has helped me in so many ways find people. So many women who have joined my company have come through that network, and so many problems I faced have been solved by women, where there's no financial gain or no, even future gain, but just purely at the service of each other, helping each other.
But it's not always the case, right? Because maybe I shouldn't admit this on camera, but I'm really not a lover of all female environments, female networking, because I just don't think that we're very supportive always of each other.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. What do you think about that? I mean, I know that we should be supporting each other, but sometimes I think we tend to pull each other down as well. And I think that's, Avanthika, you're smiling at that one.
Yeah, I've not personally faced that, but yes, I think realistically there are probably cases where women have not been very supportive of each other, mainly because they're quite insecure in this male-dominated society, or in some cases at least, that they secure a place through probably hardship. Not only pure talent can get them there, and then they're insecure of the position, so probably they may not have been very supportive of other women. So I'm just thinking that could have been the case, and haven't happened with me although.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
But this is something, that we have to change, that feeling of insecurity. Why? Because, I look now at in the last, maybe 250 years or so where, women had no votes. We were absolutely subjected to men. We didn't work. We did, we sat around being bored and pretty. Or in the case of Jane Austen, she became an author and wonderful writer. But hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, we were revered. We were women, we were rulers, we were leaders. Does anybody know where we lost that or how that male began to dominate? And are we afraid in some ways to lead? We, as responsible leaders, I think an awful lot of women, we lead from the heart, we lead from the gut, because I think a lot of that is part of our natural nurturing as a woman. But what do you think? Are we afraid to be that sort of soft woman in the boardroom among the field of men, or?
So the way I see it is that conscious leadership is something what we need, whether it's coming from men or women. There are the typologies that we just discussed that exist, those characteristics exist in men too. But I think how we react to it and how we address it is different as women and as men. So I've been having a lot of conversation with different women leaders, and we were discussing that there's a divine women and there's a victim women. Those are the two categories that we often see. And what it is that when something has happened which is not positive, sometimes women hold it and it's not processed properly. And the sadness and the wound of that sometimes comes back in a negative way or in a different way, which we wouldn't be kind. But the key is for anyone is to understand their own self-leadership. Because if somebody is not inspired by their own leadership and how they lead themselves, leading another group, it's difficult. There would always be balance. So I totally agree and support that self-leadership is very important, and holding a space when something like this happens. So then other women understand that this was not that kind. Because kindness, consciousness, empathy, that grows business. You have the proof of that in your own business. But oftentimes it's not discussed and amplified that way.
Yeah, I think actually an interesting point to reflect on is what you talked about with your twins. Have you read the book Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus? I think when I also was going through my career, before I had my own business, I worked in two really large corporate multinationals. So I worked for Reckitt Benckiser, which was one of, the top 100 FTSE companies in the UK, stock market, very male dominated. And then I worked for Mars Incorporated, which is one of the largest family companies, who are incredible in terms of what they do as a business, in all of these topics we're talking about. But I used to think that to be successful, I had to behave like a man. But actually, men and women are different, and I think, really sort of not trying to be like the guys and just leading through our own female patterns and, being fine with that. My husband all the time, he tells me we're going to a meeting together, we run the business together. He'll say, Charlotte, please don't talk too much. And he still says that to me. And I tell him, Paula, that's you, and this is me, and the way I feel comfortable to get to what I want to achieve in this meeting is through, being more communicative, being more open, which has many side benefits of building trust, authenticity, and it's about not being concerned that that's different, and not trying to be like the guys, but really living through the unique things that women can bring and girls can bring. So I have boys and girls, but really, yes, they should hold each other in equal regard, but also really trying to teach them the difference between boys and girls and celebrate that.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. It's about how to teach boys and girls to, to understand each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have a lot of friends, who have been through, difficult marriages, and often it comes down to, men and women not being able to understand each other. So it's there even on a personal level, And then that's reflected in a boardroom or in the work environment.
But I think that's a huge role of parents, right, as well. And from what you're saying, like in your household, you were bringing them up with the idea. I mean, they already were themselves,
Yes.
the same. And then yet the outer society sort of forces them. Do you talk about that with them?
Yes, so but then they're confused, right? They're at a very young age. They're confused, like which is right? Is this correct, or should we follow the other? So they're yet to realize could have an impact on them, or to see what is best for them. They're not able to connect to it. So they're currently going through a phase when slightly not able to follow what we tell them to do. To what they're actually seeing in the outer society. So
I get asked a lot working in this industry of education, which is the best school to put my kids into. The advice I give to everyone is go and look at the other families and children, because actually the impact of the friends of your children and their families, are going to be greater than the impact you have on your children and the school per se, so you should feel comfortable with that. There's a really great book on that, 3 Degrees of Influence. I can't remember the author.
How do you get time to read all these books?
I love reading. I'm a bookie, but that's so important to understand what are the other external, it's usually friends and the parents of those friends and what their belief systems are.
That's true.
I think the stories we tell to ourselves and our children is very important. We should constantly have that conversation.
Yeah.
Because when they're still in a decidery phase, because their brains are shifting from conscious to subconscious, subconscious to conscious, children are growing. I think constantly we have to have those communication.
Yeah, but then I think we have to be the type of person to be able to educate your children in that way, right? Not sitting on phones. For me personally, I see an awful lot of this nowadays. Families just sitting in restaurants or sitting in places and they're all on their phones, and I'm kind of like, where's the education going to come for these kids then as well? So I find, I love technology, but it needs to have its place. But look, we're sitting here at a table with women who are all, in certain positions. We read a lot. We understand how we need to educate. What about women in countries who have not been like as lucky as us? And who are then living in countries maybe where the men are not so educated either on how they should treat women. How do we make these changes? Because we often sit at meetings and everything and say, oh, we're empowering women, which I sort of really dislike that word, because they're generally talking to an audience of women who are already empowered. So how do we reach out and how do we help and tell the story to women and men in other countries or who are not so empowered? How do we get out to them? Because that's also changing the whole education system as well, and the way we, learning by rote, and so can we change that? How can we do this?
One of the precious gifts we can give to another person is our time. So if we have an opportunity to change or talk to one person, like whether it's mentoring, a phone conversation, or whichever it can be, sometimes we think that we have to do something big, but maybe it's just one life at a time, one step at a time. So for me, I think we are talking about giving, and we all do charity and all do give many things to many people, but giving our time to, a group of women sitting in Nepal and teaching them about solar or leadership, that 40 minutes can change people and have ripple effects. So I think consciously, if we donate our time, whether through online platforms, now there's so many platforms.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that is very powerful, because something that might you have solved in your life, and just saying that stories, I think power of stories is so important. In ancient cultures, they would have storytelling time, and the ancient grandparents would tell the stories to the younger generation. I think with technology and efficiency, we often disconnect to that tradition. So giving people that opportunity, gift of time and storytelling.
Sorry to cut you off. So there is this global network for women in renewable energy. So one of the platforms that she was mentioning. So I'm part of the platform. So what it works in very similar pattern that you just said. It is about just dedicating some time across a month or in a quarter, a couple of hours, where they bring all the women in developing countries as well on board, and they ask us to pick up a topic where you can mentor them or train them on various avenues, and it has been very helpful. And since you mentioned about Nepal, uh, there was one initiative that our company has that is we call it CS Cares. So it's like a CSR activity we do. So this is about empowering underdeveloped nations through energy access. So where we go into rural communities in Zambia, in I think Ghana, a couple of countries in Africa. We're also doing in rural India as well, where we set up microgrids. Microgrids are microgrids for, and we connect it to a dal processing plant, Thales, and pulses processing plant, or whatever is locally available, which can be processed, and there we employ and train people. This is not at a leadership level, but something a bit that we do, which I thought would be helpful. Which help. So this is about social development, training them and handing over this duty to them so that they can make their livelihood. And we focus a lot on women in this. But this is selected. So we consciously select women to get them trained to work here or to lead this enterprise. And then we head over and move to the next project.
That is so. And when you think about the challenge, it's some way mind-boggling, isn't it, to think how you can have, a tangible difference on the problems at a grassroots level. But it's not just about making a difference to educate the women. It's also probably mainly educating.
And I grew up with these little, books, Peter and Jane. And it was always, with the mommy and daddy. So mommy stayed at home and, the daddy went to work. And it was like really, really very male sort of dominated type of little children's books. And I think these kind of books are still,
yes,
on the market.
But
still
even just thinking about classroom design. So when we design early years classrooms, part of the furniture is role play. Which is part of the children's kind of curriculum and learning at an early age. And when you talk to traditional educators, it's the kitchen, this without thinking, the kitchen for the girls and then the cars, for the boys. And how many still in today with well-educated people. And it's just these kind of norms that, have been established that actually are in the, our psyche without even thinking.
That's true. And I hate to say that most of the world's chefs are male. So the girls were stuck in front of the kitchens. And most of the world's chefs are male.
When I lived in India for 3 years in Delhi, and there was a place called Tikali Bottom. It was started by the ex-naval attaché to the British embassy there in Delhi. And he decided, he lived in India, loved it, and decided to retire there. And he set up a school. I used to go and visit. So they did sort of lunches, and obviously they're trying to find funding, on a very small scale. But he set up a school for the children of the local community. And he just started with one classroom, and then each year got the funding to extend the school, to take the children through the school. And actually, part of operating the school, he gave jobs to all of the mums and the women in the community.
Yeah.
And they became self-sufficient, growing the food and, the chickens and the eggs, and teaching the mums English, to also be part of creating a school. It was really inspiring, and it made such a huge difference to that community. So I think it's about, finding something you're really passionate on, and growing one little thing into something that, creates ripple effects.
And as you said earlier, one individual can make a difference if you take the time to mentor somebody. But those two other aspects, because I'm kind of conscious of time, and I know we can probably talk till the cows come home, as we say in Ireland. But one is that women, we're very underfunded when we have our own businesses. You say giving women the options for doing business. Climate is something that's also really affecting women as well. Does anybody want to address that one? The funding, I think we get currently around 1.9%. For funding into women, into female businesses, which is obviously is a huge hardship for women. So do you want to tackle that one?
So for that hasn't happened. That has happened for generations. But right now, with the new climate finance coming in, there's a changing narrative happening, but it's not going to happen overnight because it's a mindset shift as well.
Yeah.
So when I'm talking to impact investors, so many of my work is talking to investors and finding solutions and innovative opportunities, whether it's entrepreneurial opportunities, and bringing it to the climate conversation. So many of the times we're finding, and actually last week I met a woman innovator. She innovated this really amazing product and getting her PIs and license sorted. So there are lots of groups of things happening and platforms are growing up. I think we're more getting organized as a society. That tribe is very important, have other entrepreneurs. And then the latest climate finance that has been announced for next 3 to 5 years, we're going to see more female entrepreneurs coming into the spotlight. We're seeing globally as well as here, a lot of women entrepreneurs coming up with latest solutions and technologies.
Yeah.
Adaptation is a little bit slower, but it's going to ship before 2030.
I think a lot of it also is to do with the decision makers behind the finance and men. So it comes back to this conversation about empowering women, giving them the confidence to stand up and ask for funding, but also to educate the guys in terms of how to evaluate and have the confidence and trust in women who do have this different style of putting ideas across. I think for me that is just the game changer in terms of educating men more than women.
True.
And I think there's many things. I'm really into sport, and just take things like the Olympics. Now the Olympics is the main Summer Olympics this year. For the first time was the equal number of female to male competitors. I think Winter Olympics is almost there. Now in the UK, female football, is revered, and and it's all of these little signposts around society that start to influence. I do feel like for the first time, if I sit back and think about, there are really tangible things that are changing that ultimately influence these belief systems.
I mean, I grew up in a footballing household, despite the fact that there were like 5 girls and 2 men, but it was like football predominated. And I'm ashamed to say that I hardly know any of the names of the female footballers, where I know loads of the male football names. Which is
because the
dreadful.
Guys at the moment get all the sponsorship, and they get all the TV, so they're the names that you see everywhere. But it is changing.
It is, but it's up to us, I suppose, as well, to push that forward. And Avanthika, I want to ask you, within the clean energy, within the space, I mean, you're totally accepted, obviously, as a woman. You bring, abundant knowledge and that to the table. Do you ever feel that you act differently, have to act differently?
No, not really. Like Fasan was saying, the environment is actually changing, and people are having a slightly different mindset now. They're more open to women as well, especially in clean energy. To just touch back on the earlier question, I had sat in many of those startup rounds where men or women, they come in with their business ideas when they have a novel technology or something in hand. With various funding agencies like the UNIDO, sometimes even the Sharjah Investment Authority, and many others. So what I've actually seen is a lot of women are participating. That's first trend. Secondly, their business idea is evaluated just on pure basis of whether it has business potential or does it make sense for scaling up. Many women have been also awarded funds at various packages, which is actually quite encouraging. Sorry, I'm going back to the earlier question.
Yeah.
So reflecting on that, to your next question, yes, I have never been perceived differently because I'm a woman standing in a panel or addressing a board, a corporate board, when presenting some of our findings, or even coming in and trying to get partnerships with a new technology company. So they take us as panel or equal with the male members who are on my team. So yeah, I've actually not faced it, but maybe that I'm also probably lucky.
Yeah, you're tough. I think you're tough. I mean, I think I have faced it, definitely. Even here in the UAE, because sometimes with a previous company that I had, when you were going looking for payment or something, and I got a very like male sort of story, or maybe somebody would like, I'm sick and this, that, and the other, and I'm kind of like, that is a really odd story, and you will never do that if I was another man. You would never tell me that story. So I said to him, "You will be sick if you don't pay me." So, but I have faced that, and I know still worldwide, like globally, not just here in the UAE, because I think there's a huge push from the leadership on, as we mentioned earlier, women are in really high positions here, but still, like even in the country I come from Ireland, there is still a gap, a pay gap as well. I think that about a year ago, I think women in Ireland said they were going to go on strike or they were stopped getting paid from October to December. They were working for free because that was actually the number of months they weren't, but that was the number of months that was actually the difference in the pay gap. Which they still say is kind of like the gender gap is like 140 years. I think it's getting less and less. So we have to put a lot on our new generation. Final thoughts on, because I don't want this to be like a male bashing, discussion, but I think it's really, really important that we do push out on these conversations, on pushing women forward, because I still think we lag behind because we lack the confidence, I think, to move forward. What is your hope for the future with this new generations and?
So the hope for the future for new generation is conscious leadership. I think it's very important. It starts from home, and we all have to start having those uncomfortable conversations with our children and our communities. But it is something, conscious leadership is very important to drive phenomenal change. And we are all part of a built environment. We all want to make impact, but to make impact real, we have to have those uncomfortable conversations and sometimes not take no for an answer. Relentless optimism. That's my hope for the future.
Nice. I like that one. Relentless optimism. Excellent. Charlotte.
Yeah, no, my hope for the future actually is, men and women can understand each other better. I think, it's not about men just understanding women, women understanding men, really being able to celebrate the differences both boys and girls bring to the party, and understand the nuances, the patterns, and learn to bring those together in partnership. I think that can help on so many levels. Friendships, marriage, in the workplace, in creating an impact in governments. So that's my hope for the future.
Nice. Avanthika, tell me what your female hopes for the future are.
Yes, so it should be that women should be able to work in the board or anywhere without being insecure. They also men appreciating them for the differences that they bring in. Although I know there are specific nuances that women bring to a table or to a company or to the industry that needs to be appreciated what it is, then rather than being judged, and she shouldn't be feeling that, oh, am I doing enough? I think they should not be feeling that.
Yeah. Excellent. Listen, thank you so much. I have really enjoyed this, and I can go on, and I know we can go on talking endlessly about positions of women, but I think, this whole give to gain, I like this idea. Actually, I think I told you this earlier. I was tossing around in the idea of these three words, how they can become really negative if you put them around gain to give. But I love the theme of giving, and what you mentioned earlier about being able to just, if we just give to one person our time, I think that's really important. So I thank you all for your time this morning, Charlotte, Farah, and Avanthika. Thank you so much for being with us here today on AERZENtalks, and look forward to continuing these conversations in the future. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much.